Recently, posts were going viral on social media calling for the removal of Taino artifacts from Christie's auction house in Paris. The buying and selling of indigenous artifacts isn't new. In fact, it has been widely accepted and seen as normal for hundreds of years, for museums and private collectors alike. But what do the people whose heritage these artifacts belong to feel about such sales? I went on a deep dive to see how activists and Taínos are attempting to change this practice and if it's even ethical.
These items that you're seeing being sold at Christie's or maybe in museums, displayed in museums, are World Heritage items. They do belong to our people.
Museums and auction houses across the world have been outed in recent years for exhibiting looted and stolen items, all in the name of historical and cultural education. But this education has always been tainted by racism. The shrunken heads from Ecuador and Peru on display at the Pitt Rivers Museum in England, for example, were used as proof of the racial superiority of white people. Even as recently as 1897, indigenous artifacts were stolen from Benin in Africa and spread throughout European museums as primitive artifacts. Christie's, a British auction house founded in 1766, is most known for selling art pieces by Monet, Picasso, and Da Vinci. In 2017, the Salvator Mundi was sold for $400 million at Christie's in New York, which at the time was the highest price ever paid for a single painting at an auction. Christie's allegedly charges its clients an estimated 25% for the first $75,000, 20% on the next $75,000 to $1.5 million, and 12% on the rest. Its sales in 2015 totaled $7.4 billion. Indigenous artifacts are a big ticket item for the auction house. But unlike paintings by Leonardo da Vinci, the acquisition of indigenous artifacts is much more sinister. In 2020, Christie's was forced to withdraw 4 Greek Roman artifacts from sale after it was discovered that they came from sites linked to convicted antiquities traffickers. That same year, they were criticized for putting up a Benin plaque and 2 Igbo Alusi figures for auction. The plaque was tied to similar plaques taken from Nigeria during the violent Benin expedition of 1897. Many indigenous nations worldwide have been demanding the return of their artifacts for years, and Taínos are no different. The Taínos, an indigenous people native to the Caribbean, have a rich and complex history. Taínos have long experienced erasure and violent colonization. They were the first contact people with the Spaniards, and today are still experiencing colonial and imperial challenges. Taínos, however, are not federally recognized as a tribal nation, like many Native Americans are, partly due to the Commonwealth status of Puerto Rico, where some Taínos still live today, which makes claiming indigeneity a little tricky for Taino descendants. Even for someone like me, a Boricua with proof of their Taino ancestry, I still have a hard time claiming to be indigenous, and that's apparently by design. When the Spaniards colonized the Caribbean, they forced indigenous women to marry conquistadores and Spanish settlers in order to eradicate Indios. And for centuries, the narrative that Taínos no longer exist became widely accepted as truth. In a since-deleted promotional video for the Christie's auction of the artifacts, they use the same extinction narrative.
It's part of the rhetoric that has always been used. The first ones to use it were the Spaniards. That's it's called a down-cutting mechanism, and is used to dispossess people from their ancestral heritage. And so by saying that the indigenous people disappeared in less than 50 years, basically it's just saying that part of that's other people, that they are different people from what we are now, and so that we cannot claim possession of that. Recently, there were 2 major DNA studies that were published, one in the 2 major scientific journals in the world. And both of those studies actually agreed on one thing. Puerto Rico is the island where you see the most clear evidence of biological continuity with the indigenous people of the past. And you look at the evidence, right now I am studying a canoe that just came out in the western part of the island. And it's interesting because the canoe, when I saw it, I thought it was, pre-colonial. I thought it was from, prior to the time when the Spaniards invaded the Puerto Rico. But when I radiocarbon dated, it came back to between the 17th and the 19th centuries. And so, there you have like a Taino or something indigenous canoe, being produced in late colonial times.
So to see Taino artifacts being sold in a European auction house for thousands of dollars, that hits hard for thousands of those who are reclaiming their Taino identity.
I am Jesenia Irahamatunai. I am from Arayeke, Yucayeke. This has really hurt us a lot, especially seeing the auction live. I put out a video literally saying that it felt so surreal. And as soon as the hammer hit, I started breaking down crying. It really, because it's not, they just see it as artifacts, are like literal art. It's not that. They have something called semis. That's the spirits of our ancestors, and we lost that. We lost ceremonial spatulas. Yesterday was a very, very dark day for all of us.
My name is Dean Huertas. I'm an activist on social media. I spread awareness around Puerto Rican history and culture and politics and daily lifestyle of what goes on in the archipelago of Puerto Rico. Honestly, I really felt like it was a slap to the face. You think that what's left of our indigenous culture is preserved and saved throughout the Caribbean islands. And then you have something that's rightfully ours being sold off and auctioned off to whoever wants to buy it. It's like taking a piece of your home and selling it to somebody that has no need for it whatsoever, when that piece of home should come back home, whether that be to Jamaica, Haiti, PR or DR or Cuba for that matter. That it's being a part of your home that's being sold off is, I find, very disrespectful, and I find very sad, to say the truth.
The legality of the artifacts being sold are widely contested. Rumors began to spread that tribes were claiming the items were actually replicas and not authentic pieces. When I reached out to Christie's, they sent me a statement that the artifacts are being sold legally and have been authenticated. But Priscilla Colon of Casa Areto, a linguist and my Taino language teacher, says that Christie's statement doesn't sway her from seeing such sales as being problematic and unethical.
If you go back and see some of the letters that Christie's as an auction house has told people, they say, well, we have an authenticator on site, and we have people who basically make sure that they have the right provenance or the right documentation, the right history to know that they're not stolen. But if you think about it logically, 530 years ago, what kind of provenance are you going to have?
Archaeologist and professor Reniel Ramos agrees with Priscilla.
And this Christie's auction, they were selling 20 pieces that they considered to be Taino art. And there are some that definitely look authentic, and that's very unethical on their part. I contacted the International Association for Caribbean Archaeology for them to denounce the situation, because what happens is that this type of activity provides an incentive for looters and for people to operate in the black market, so that this continues happening. People say, well, I have this piece, I can sell it for thousands of dollars, so let's get it on, let's keep this moving.
Those reclaiming their Taino heritage and identity would like to see museums and auction houses do the right thing and give the items back to the community. Jesenia, who was instrumental in starting a petition on change.org to stop the sale, a petition that has since garnered over 30,000 signatures, says that although Christie's didn't do the right thing by pulling the items, it is still a win for the movement.
I see it also as a win, because I feel the Caribbean Taino, the Caribbean community hasn't been as united, and we all united for this common cause. And it's a stepping stone for the future, for all the things that we can fight for the future, you know.
I would like to see the tribes whatever set islands come together to take it to court. We're gonna rattle some cages and let it be known that these are our facts. We're gonna let it be known that we are still here. We're gonna let it be known that we're not fooling around anymore, okay? We want what's ours, and we will take it by any means necessary.
My way of reclaiming my Indigenous culture started through reclaiming the Indigenous language. So once I started researching the meanings of even simple words, right? There's so much meaning behind it that is completely ingrained in the culture, in the spirituality. So I'll give you an example of a word, semi. So a semi is a physical representation of an ancestral spirit. This is more than just a piece of rock, it's a piece of wood. Just understanding what that one word semi means opens up this whole other perspective that I didn't have. So now I understand, you know, the intrinsic relationship that our ancestors had to the material things around them. They weren't material, everything had a soul. If you tie that kind of like spirituality to the language, you start really understanding who we are as a people. And that's why, you know, when I talk about trying to bring back the Taino language, I'm also talking about promoting the culture and that perspective.
Colonization is not only part of the Taínos' past, but it's also its current reality. But with a new generation fighting for liberation and respect, it's possible that auctions like the one at Christie's will become a thing of the past.